Hi friends, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today we're looking at Mooncat's newest collection called Lost in a Folktale. So this collection is inspired by a dreamy woodland forest and it features some really whimsical shades. So I will have comparisons and of course my thoughts at the end, but for now, let's just get into the swatches. The first shade is Pixiestick, and it is this white, very sheer, almost crelly kind of polish. I would say this is another one of those ghostly Mooncat shades, but it's mainly a white base with an iridescent shimmer running throughout. So as you can see on the first coat, you definitely do see that white base coming through, but once you start moving around your nail, it starts kind of disappearing in certain angles, but at the same time, the shimmer is very, very intense. So I'm a huge fan of this type of finish. I think it can look nice in one coat, but I went with a clear kind of base coat today, so my staining is coming through, but if I did go with a milkier base coat, it would probably look a lot better. But anyway, here it is built up on two coats, and you can see that it starts to build up that white base a little bit more, but you can still see through to my nail line. So this is definitely a very sheer polish. So I did do a third coat to build up the shade a little bit more, but it still was pretty sheer. I think because the shimmer is so distracting, I didn't really care too much about seeing through to my nail line because I really like these shades, especially for the springtime, but I did notice it was a little bit patchy, though it didn't bother me too much because I really like this color. Next up we have Poisonberry, and this is a very sheer lavender crelly base with an intense purple shimmer and a fine dusting of micro holographic glitter. So this shade is pretty much identical in terms of its finish to the shades in the Goddess Complex collection that came out last month. So here on the first coat, you can see just how sheer it is. I guess you could also call this another kind of ghostly shade, but I personally didn't find this one to self-level as well, or maybe I just didn't apply it as evenly as some of the other shades. But yeah, I just kind of expected this to have a little bit more of a crelly kind of formula, but this one was just a little bit more sheer than that, and I think it showed a little bit more brush strokes. I'm not sure how well you can actually see them, but yeah, I think the brush strokes are what kind of caused this to look a little bit patchy because it sort of obscured the shimmer in certain parts of my nail, if that makes sense. So it just didn't look as even, maybe. But yeah, so overall, I just wasn't crazy about the formula of this shade, but I really love the color and just the finish overall. Up next, we have Flight of the Monarchs, and this is a very intense orangey gold shimmer polish in an almost muted lavender type of jelly base. So you'll see here on the first coat, the shimmer is very, very intense under the more direct lighting. And I found this one to apply very smooth and it's self-leveled really nicely. So I think you really could get away with one coat of this if you wanted. But yeah, as you see when I'm moving around my nail, there's just that kind of darker purple leaning base, which I thought was really cool because even though the main shimmer is orange, there's still a gold shimmer in this as well. And purple is complementary to yellow. So I thought maybe they did that just to increase the contrast of the shimmer, and I really love it. So here it is built up on two coats. I think it looks almost opaque, where it's opaque enough for me, but you could do a third. The next polish we have is Weeping Willow, and this is a very dark forest green magnetic polish that has a magnetic shimmer that shifts from green to teal, and this also has reflective glitters, but it's a lot more sparse than previous Mooncat reflective glitters. The formula on this one was a little bit more on the crelly side because it wasn't totally opaque on one coat, kind of like some other Mooncat magnetics, but you still could see through to my nail line a little bit, so it had a slight jelly feel. I definitely would recommend building this up in 2 coats to make it fully opaque. The base color is definitely deep enough that I think most people can just get away with 2 coats because it's like a really rich, almost jewel toned kind of green, and it has a beautiful contrast to the magnetic shimmer. So I'm not sure if I was just holding the magnet like a little too low or something, but towards the tip of my nail, I feel like it's not as crisp of a magnetic strip. But here is a clip with flash, so you can see the reflective glitters in here. It's definitely a beautiful twinkling shimmer going on, but not as obnoxious as normal reflective glitters can be. And here I'm trying my velvet nails hack where I'm holding the magnet right next to my nail as I apply this coat and then move the magnet to the other side, but this kind of was a fail. It didn't really do much, and I'm not sure if it's the magnetic shimmer in this or the fact that I just painted this over my existing swatch, but even though it was a fail, I love the color. Next we have Shroomdom, and this is a vibrant red jelly base that is absolutely packed with gold irregular flakies as well as a gold shimmer. So this one was so beautiful. It gave me really even coverage on the first coat, and it is a jelly, so you could see through directly to my nail line, but I was so impressed with the coverage on this one. It wasn't streaky at all. It had an amazing amount of flakies that were evenly distributed, so I think you could get away with wearing this in 1 coat. I did do a second coat because I tend to wear my jellies in 2 coats, and I think it builds up the flakies and the shimmer really well. There just is so much depth and dimension to the shade, but it still is very squishy looking. You can still see through to my nail line pretty easily. So if you're not into jellies, maybe you wouldn't be into this. And I did try a 3rd coat just to see if that would make it a little bit more opaque, but I don't think it did that much. So I wouldn't say doing 3 coats is necessary. You can definitely just get away with 2. And rounding out the collection, we have Stumped, which is a deep brown jelly base packed with this multi-chrome flaky that shifts from gold to copper to green. This is basically autumn in a bottle, and I might not be ready for it right now, but it is beautiful. Unfortunately, I didn't get the same even coverage as I did with Shroomdom, so it was a little bit patchy and see-through in certain spots, but because the base color is so dark, it built up to full opacity in 2 coats, and oh my gosh, the flakies in this one are just unreal. They are so layered, but at the same time so clear. It's almost as if they're just floating on top of the jelly base. It's beautiful. Now moving on to comparisons, I wanted to start by showing Pixiestick next to Ghosts of Hecate from the Goddess Complex collection. It is their iconic ghostly white polish with an intense blue shimmer. So while they might have similar vibes in the bottle, on the nail, they are definitely not close to being dupes. This is 2 coats of each, by the way. But surprisingly enough, I did have a really similar polish in my collection. You may have seen this one if you watched my everything I bought from PPU last year. This is Great Lakes Lacquer Lake Superior Shenanigans that I picked up in maybe November or December of last year. And it has a very similar white crelly base and opalescent blue to green shifting shimmer. So if you missed out on the Great Lakes Lacquer one, I would say this Mooncat is a great alternative. Next for Poisonberry, I had to quickly show it next to Aphrodisiac, also from the Goddess Complex collection, but this is like the pink sister version of the shade. And here it is next to Winds of Fate, which is another favorite Mooncat shade of mine, but it kind of has more of that purple to pink shifting base color and then a strong peachy gold shimmer that also shifts to green, so not similar at all. And here is Into the Wishing Well, which has more of a deeper blue-toned periwinkle kind of base color with another peachy to green shifting shimmer, but this one does have that little holographic sparkle. And for Flight of the Monarchs, I actually have Cirque's Fandango to compare it to, which I just shared in my spring favorites video. It was the closest that I had in terms of a very shimmery orange type of base with a more prominent gold shimmer. But as you can probably tell, the Cirque shade is a little bit brighter because it doesn't have that purple kind of jelly base color that Mooncat does. So while they're similar, I wouldn't call them dupes. If anything, they're just different seasons of the same polish. Weeping Willow, I wanted to show it next to Mooncat's Sunken Splendor from their Expedition Atlantis collection because it's a kind of similar green base with reflective glitters that's also magnetic, and maybe they look similar in the bottle, but once you see them applied on the nail, they are totally different vibes. They obviously have a couple of different elements to them, but the main difference I would say is that Sunken Splendor is more of a jelly. I thought that maybe Holo Taco's Wicked Potion would be a little bit closer to a color comparison since it is another very deep, almost jewel-toned green magnetic polish. But while it's kind of similar, they still aren't exactly dupes either. Wicked Potion is a little bit more of a blackened green base and also has that holographic flaky outside of the magnetic shimmer, so it's a little bit more prominent than the reflective glitter in Mooncat. For Shroomdom, I wanted to quickly show it next to Reclaim Your Flame from Mooncat's now discontinued Hocus Pocus 2 collaboration, but yeah, these are very different vibes. But here it is next to Strangeberry from their Kaleidoscope Haze collection, so you can see how similar they are in terms of that jelly flaky formula, but obviously Strangeberry is very much pink and Shroomdom is a bright red. So I thought that it would be kind of fun to try and recreate Shroomdom, so I used Cirque's Lucky Jelly, which came out earlier this year, and it's the closest bright red jelly that I have. It looks a little bit darker than Shroomdom, but once I layered it with Holo Taco's Solar Unicorn Skin, it pretty much gave a very similar effect. So I did 2 coats of my jelly base, 1 coat of my flaky topper, and then 1 coat of the jelly base again for a classic jelly flaky sandwich, and it was nearly identical, but I would say that the Mooncat shade has a few more flakies, so if you do have these 2 shades, I would recommend just doing a second layer of the flaky topper in between. And lastly, for Stumped, I wanted to show it next to the website photo for Haunted Forest because it was another similar, very dark jelly base with these flakies, but Haunted Forest is a black jelly base with more of a green to red and purple shifting multi-chrome flaky. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Mooncat's Lost in a Folktale collection. As always, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this release because, to be completely honest, when I first saw the colors, I was like, okay, that's interesting. You know, it didn't really feel cohesive to me. But once I saw the inspiration photos, the marketing photos, and obviously, you know, understanding like the theme of the collection, it all started to fit together like a beautiful puzzle. And I was able to really see Michelle's vision with this collection. So I think she did do a great job overall of just like nailing this theme of this whimsical woodland, you know, with the fairies and butterflies. I think it's so beautiful. And all the polishes are great too, but you know, personally, I'm a big seasonal wearer, so I'm gonna be gravitating towards the 3 lighter shades. I know I'm wearing the red right now, but it's mainly for the video. But yeah, I think these darker 3 shades would be so beautiful in the fall time, but I'm sure there's going to be so many people who are going to be just wearing them now because, you know, you don't care about wearing a specific color during a certain time of year. I'm just weird like that. But I did do a cute nail art look with this whole collection. In case you don't follow me on my Instagram, here's a photo of it. But I really loved how that came out, and I thought it was just so fun to use all of these shades, especially the darker ones, in this really creative look that just captured the theme of this collection. So hopefully you enjoyed that. But yeah, definitely let me know any and all thoughts that you have on this collection or just Mooncat in general down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.